Welcome to our review on fossil fuels and biomass. First thing we're going to look at then are the fossil fuels. Now, first phrase we need to remember is that phrase non-renewable. So whenever we're talking about something that's non-renewable, we're talking about an energy resource that will run out. And fossil fuels are examples of non-renewable energy resources. Hopefully you remember the three of them there. They're coal, oil and natural gas. Now, the reason we call these fossil fuels is because they formed the remains of living organisms that died millions of years ago, and it takes millions of years for a fossil fuel to form. And the reason that we've got a big problem these days is that we're actually using them up much faster than they're being replaced, which does mean we will hit a point at some point in the not too distant future where some of those fossil fuels will in fact have run out. When we looked at power stations, we described this thermal power station, and we just said that different things can be burnt in them. Fossil fuels are one of these examples of things that we can use to power a thermal power station. So in a fossil fuel power station, we burn the fossil fuel, that heat is generated and therefore used to turn water into steam, steam drives the turbines, and turbines spin a generator which produces the electricity. So the process remains the same. So we're going to burn something, in this case one of our fossil fuels, that turns water into steam, steam turns the turbines, turbines spin the generator, and we make electricity as a result. There are some significant disadvantages of using fossil fuels. The biggest of them is that when we burn fossil fuels we release pollutants into the atmosphere, and one of the key ones there being carbon dioxide. We know already that carbon dioxide then contributes to global warming, and global warming obviously has some pretty significant effects on the whole planet. The other issue we've got is that all of these fossil fuels have to be mined and transported. So mining is obviously problematic because it can destroy the landscape, it's very dusty, it's noisy, etc. And in terms of the transport, again, we're generating more carbon dioxide because anytime we've got vehicles, we're going to be generating carbon dioxide. There are some key advantages to fossil fuels though. First of all, it's an established, reliable technology. So this means that we can rely on it to produce large amounts of electricity over a long period of time. So there are no kind of drawbacks of using it in that respect. It's not a case of it only works at certain points based on whether the wind's blowing the right way or whether the sun's out. So it is established, it is reliable, and it does produce large amounts of electricity. Second type of fuel we can use is biomass. Now, biomass is an example of a renewable energy resource, and whenever we talk about biomass, we're talking about something that involves material from living organisms. If we're going to be using biomass for burning, then we have a biofuel. So our thermal power station will work exactly the same way as a fossil fuel power station, the only difference being instead of burning a fossil fuel, we're burning a biofuel. So we burn the biofuel, we generate the heat, heat then turns water into steam, steam drives the turbines, turbines turn the generators, generators make the electricity. So the only difference is what we're burning in the first instance. And when we talk about biomass, we're talking about something that was originally a living organism of some form. When we're thinking about biofuels then, they can be either solids, liquids or gases. So some examples of different biofuels for you. We've got wood chips, we've got straw, we have alcohol that comes from fermented sugarcane, we've got methane gas that can come from animal waste that we can put in these things called a sludge digester. So obviously we've got our solids there in the case of the wood chips, the straw. We've got our liquid in the alcohols that we're going to generate from fermenting our sugar crops, and the methane gas which comes from these sludge digesters that just take in animal waste and turn it into something useful for us. When we think about the UK then, over 40% of the renewable energy actually comes from biomass. So it's not coming from solar power, wind power and all of this. Biomass is responsible for 40% of our renewable energy. Now it does have some pretty significant advantages for us. First of all, we're actually using products that might otherwise have been wasted, which means the fuel costs are kept nice and low. We can also use the hot water from the power stations to supply local homes and local industry. And this is something described as a carbon neutral process. All that means is that the amount of carbon dioxide that was taken in as the plant was alive is exactly the same as the amount of carbon dioxide released when we burn it. So carbon neutral just means that the amount of carbon dioxide remains the same, because whatever we take in as the plant's growing is then released when we burn it. There are some disadvantages as well, however. It does release atmospheric pollutants, and we will also find a big problem in terms of land. So whatever land that we're using to grow these biofuel crops are now obviously not being used to grow things like food crops. So if we're thinking about developing countries where they're thinking these biofuels are a way to make some money, then they're not growing food crops in that area, which means there could be food shortages. And the other downside is we still have a big power plant, and they're not the prettiest of things to look at. So some people obviously don't like the look of them.